Okay, we'll just give others a few minutes to join before we start. Nika, are we good to go? All right. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I hope we're all keeping well and staying safe. I have the singular honor and privilege to welcome you to the 16th edition of DCSL's webinar series. This webinar series is titled Understanding ESG, the framework for assessing the impact of the sustainability and ethical practices of a company. Some attendees might be wondering what exactly are the reasons for the choice of this topic, particularly considering that companies are basically incorporated and run to make profits and fill the pockets of their shareholders and investors, which incidentally we are part of. So why the topic ESG? Well, times and tides have changed, and the governance space continues to evolve. Reliance is no longer placed on profitability and return on investment as the sole yardsticks for measuring corporate or organizational performance, particularly for not-for-profit organizations. Other important considerations are now taken into account while judging the success or performance of a company, business, or investment. One of such key considerations is ESG. So ESG, environmental, social, and governance, refers to the three key factors considered when measuring the sustainability and ethical impact of an investment or a company. There are critical criteria or standards for a company's operation that investors use to measure the performance of such company. So we have environmental, we have social, and we have governance. Environmental, in this case, refers to the criteria which deals with how a company performs as a steward of nature. So environmental criteria may include a company's energy use, waste, how they handle waste, how they handle pollution, the way they go about with regards to natural resource conservation, and even how to treat animals. Social criteria examine how the company manages the relationship with employees, for example, with suppliers, with customers, and the communities where it operates. Whilst governance deals with a company's leadership, executive pay, audits, internal controls, and so shareholder rights. Basically, ESG has gained increasing attention over the last few years. You know, with many investors investing only in companies that provide ESG performance reporting. So even asset managers and other financial institutions also rely on ESG ratings to assess, measure, and compare the company's performance. According to the most recent report from the US Social Investment Forum Foundation, investors held $11.6 trillion worth of investments or assets chosen according to ESG criteria as at 2018. That underscores the importance of ESG. ESG is not new in Nigeria. As far back as 2013, the Central Bank of Nigeria had issued the Nigeria Sustainability Banking Principles, which was applicable to banks and companies in the financial services industry. Part of the goal of that principle, sustainable banking principle, is the requirement that the composition of boards of banks must include 30% female. We see how that now. Most banks have at least 30% females in their composition. Also, the Securities and Exchange Commission also issued the Sustainability Disclosure Guidelines, which became effective on 1st January 2019. The guidelines sets out recommendations for good practice in 13 key areas to underscore ESG reporting. Also, the Nigerian Stock Exchange has taken the lead in adopting sustainability practices and had also insisting that most of the companies that it regulates must imbibe those principles. ESG principles are also reinforced under the Nigerian Code of Corporate Governance. Basically, Principle 28.2 requires the annual reports of every company to highlight sustainability policies and programs covering social issues such as corruption, community service, including environmental protection, serious diseases, and matters of general environmental, social, and governance initiatives. So as the growing reliance on ESG to measure the sustainability and ethical impact of enterprises mounts, it is important for organizations and would-be investors to understand the concept, given that financial performance is in the present times not only the yardstick used to measure business success. Organizations are now expected to do more and to show, in addition to financial performance, the way and manner their operations have impacted society. The aim of this webinar is to provide an overview of an ESG framework and how it supports a company's overall financial performance. We will also discuss corporate pressures and stakeholder expectations and their impact on businesses. Today on the webinar, we have a distinguished subject matter expert, Mrs. Ini Abimbola, the founder, Crystal Practice Consulting, who will be speaking on the team. Ms. Abimbola will be educating us on those range of behaviors an organization must exhibit to be classified as ESG compliant. I particularly will appreciate the opportunity to be tutored on the pros and cons of environmental, social, and governance by the expert herself. So without much ado, I will set the ground rules to set the tone for the roundtable before introducing our facilitator. So we are pleased enjoying that to enable a seamless session, we will appreciate all participants to rename your devices using appropriate names, name and surname, instead of using the name of your phone like Galaxy Note 2 or Mac iPhone. Please, so that we can properly address you in the event that you ask questions or you have a comment. We'll also ask the participants to remember to stay muted while the session is ongoing. We'll try as much as we can to mute the people that will come from the back end. Also, participants are enjoined to leave comments and contributions in the chat box. We'll have 20 minutes at the end of the presentation for Q&A, and we'll try to take your questions, many questions as possible. So we urge participants to send their questions to the Q&A box so that the resource person can attend to such questions and concerns. That said, my name is Ozo Chinedu. By way of introduction, I head the legal advisory unit at DCSL Corporate Services Limited, and I'll be the moderator and the middleman between you and our distinguished facilitator today. So speaking of our guest and the key facilitator at the webinar, Mrs. Ini Abimbola. She is a business executive with over 20 years experience working in international development space with broad consulting experience and expertise in corporate governance, management consulting, sustainability development, communication, and strategy. As mentioned earlier, she is the founder and former lead consultant and CEO of T2 Braxis Consulting Limited, a management consulting, sustainability strategy, and business advisory firm founded in 2010. Ms. Abimbola guides boards, executives, governance, risk, and sustainability practitioners towards social, environmental, and economic innovations that also creates shareholder and business value. Before setting up T2 Braxis Consulting, she served as executive director on Women in Management and Business, WIMBIZ, as the executive secretary, where she not only helped to revitalize the organization, but also moved membership from 100 members to 300 members. She has published and authored 3 books and over 25 publications, chapters and articles, and has delivered more than 120 presentations in over 15 countries in the last 10 years, on a range of topics, some of which include corporate governance, change management, enterprise development, sustainability, and CSR. She's a member of the Council for the Development of Social Science Research in Africa and the Institute of Directors. We didn't add that she's well-read and also well-traveled. Before we invite Mrs. Abimbola to deliver her presentation, we have arranged for a poll to break the ice and to put us in the right mood for today's presentation. So we shall be deploying the poll now. The poll is basically aimed at weighing our knowledge of ESG and the adaptation of same in our organizations. We will use only 2 minutes to complete and conclude the poll, following which the results will be displayed. The poll, please. Nike, can you confirm that we have deployed the pool? Okay. So the first question says, prior to today's session, have you heard of the concept environmental, social, and governance, ESG? The second question reads, do you think ESG is relevant to your organization? The third question states, which of the following do you consider an imperative in implementing ESG? Okay, and the last question, which of the following best describes the importance of adopting ESG best practices? We have a minute more to conclude. Which of the following best describes the importance of adopting ESG best practice? Okay, so we'll end the poll now. Ms. Abimbola will run us through the result of the poll and thereafter deliver her presentation. Ms. Abimbola, please.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Inedu. Hello, everyone. Good evening. So quite interesting. I was just looking through and taking out some notes around the poll. I can see here that a good number of people, 95%, have heard about the concept of ESG before now. So that's very good. Makes my work very easy this evening. And okay, about it's 95% also say that they think that it's relevant, and just about 5% think that they're not sure about how relevant it is to their organization. 84% say that all of the above, are very important in implementing ESG, which is a diversity and inclusion policy, a sustainability policy, and a corporate social responsibility initiatives, and all of that. And then, of course, which of the following best describes the importance? And of course, about 68% say that it's important because it provides valuable insights on the factors that influence the company's financial performance. 21% say they think that it only impacts strategic risk management. 11% say it only influences investment decisions. So thank you for this insight. And I would like to see this poll again after, or something else after the session, just to highlight some of these things, because some of the issues we will be raising these issues, and you can take your final decision from there to say which of this describes the importance of it. I will want to agree with all those that say all of the above for the question number 4, because this is what ESG does. Not only does it look at financial performance, and not only does it influence investment decisions, but it actually impacts strategic risk of the business. And risk management is a very core aspect of the ESG content. So at this point, I will just go ahead and share my slides, and then we can have a fantastic conversation this afternoon, or this evening, pardon me. Okay, so I'm just going to do this. So this evening, we're talking about ESG as a framework for assessing the impacts of sustainability and the ethical practices of companies. I typically like to discuss ESG, or have the ESG conversation, by starting with corporate governance. Corporate governance is at the heart of the ESG conversation. And so that's why it's always important that C-suite executives, management, and people who sit on the boards understand clearly what we are talking about. It's the same conversation when we started talking about sustainability a couple of years ago, and hammering on the need that for sustainability policies, for sustainability strategies, the core difference between just having CSR initiatives and having a sustainability policy that drives your CSR, and of course situates your ESG. A lot of professionals did not understand it. I mean, they've always understood CSR to be something we do as philanthropy and charity, and something we do when we've made enough money, and something we do because it is good to do. It is nice to have. It makes us look good to the community. But the conversation has moved from just having CSR initiatives, which are fantastic, by the way, because when you put your CSR and your sustainability together, that is the basis for your ESG framework. I'll say that again. Your CSR initiatives, which is your philanthropy, charity, your corporate giving, your school support, your water support, and all of that you give to the communities around you, or the communities that you engage with, plus your sustainability, which goes into your diversity and inclusion, goes into how you manage your waste, how you mitigate your risk, how you manage your energy efficiency and things like that, how you coordinate your internal stakeholders and your external stakeholders, your employee relations and labor relations. When you put two together, that forms the basis for putting together an ESG framework. It's very important that this is understood. So nothing works in isolation. You can't just pull out an ESG framework from the sky. Your sustainability strategy and policy, which has to be all encompassing and very holistic, is the basis for your ESG. So here, corporate governance, again, as I said, that's why you have boards, corporate secretaries, governance professionals, operating in the dynamic landscape of evolving ESG issues and risks. And so as it becomes increasingly important, it's also important that this group of people understand what this means for shareholder narratives and for the engagement of the totality of engagement within the organization itself. Before now, ESG was limited to just investor issues, but now it's expanded, and we're going to see more of that. So not just mutual funds and all of that, but even private equity as well. And it's not a new thing, as Chinedu earlier mentioned. It's not a new thing at all. So in following up on that, I just want to show what the principles of corporate governance is and how this relates to the conversations that we're saying. So when we talk about corporate governance, we're not just talking about board issues, because I think a lot of people always understand corporate governance as board issues. They're not just board issues. It's much more than board issues. So when you look at issues of accountability, for instance, we're talking about measuring performance, and that could be social performance, financial performance, environmental performance as a business. What kind of emissions are you spewing? What kind of generators do you have that is creating, a log or clog within the drains around your business? Transparency and openness. How are you giving your disclosures, your annual reports, your non-financial reports? Do you have non-financial reports like a sustainability report that you issue? And we'll talk about responsibility. We're talking about compliance, controls, risk management, integrity and ethical conduct, the tone at the top. What is management saying? What are the shareholders saying? What are the investors saying? Reputation. What is your reputation in the marketplace? How is your business or company perceived in the marketplace? When you talk about stakeholder management, are you being fair to your stakeholders? Have you even identified your stakeholders? Are you engaging your stakeholders? Are you in any way even managing your stakeholders? I think these are the core issues when we talk about corporate governance, the encapsulation of what corporate governance is. And then we talk about independence, independence of the leadership, the strategy that the organization is putting together, and the direction. What's the focus of this business? So these are the issues that are at the heart of corporate governance, as it were. So then again, I want to talk about sustainability, because again, as I've explained earlier, you need to understand sustainability. Sustainability is not CSR. CSR is a part of sustainability. I like to break it down so that it's understood, because I have clients that we always have to have this conversation. You can have a CSR policy and a CSR strategy, which aligns what you will invest your money in. But your sustainability encompasses your internal and external stakeholders. And again, we describe it as a business approach, as a form of creating value and a process of analysis and decision making. So it's not an abstract. Sustainability is a business approach that seeks to build long-term competitiveness without, compromising short-term profitability and cash flows. So you're thinking long-term when you talk about sustainability, and you're looking at it from the point of view of the economy, the society, and the environment. So what we know as PPP, people, planet, and profit. So that's the way you look at it. It is an approach to creating value. It's about value, and we say it's about the value that sustains or enhances the system that you're operating within. So that's very important. What is the value that you're creating that will keep sustaining the business over the long term? And then it's a process of analysis and decision making across all business functions. So it's not something that your corporate marketing, your marketing communications deals with alone. It's not something that, the CSR department, that's your problem, please deal with it. No, it is something that is across all business functions. So your risk managers need to understand what your sustainability strategy is and how it links to your enterprise risk management framework. So it's deeper than just saying, oh, we have a sustainability. Do you understand the sustainability strategy? Have you trained your board and your management to understand sustainability and how it links to ESG and how that links to the overall positioning of your business? So again, as I said, these issues are not just abstract. You must understand them for what they are. So what is this ESG that we are talking about? ESG refers to a framework that integrates environmental, social, and governance risk and opportunity. It integrates the risk and opportunity. So what it does for organizations is that it helps them to identify, mitigate, or manage the risk that comes with doing business. And the idea is for them to be able to build long-term financial sustainability and value creation. So you're not just operating. So if I give you examples of business, so for example, many of us will remember Onward Paper Mill. If I ask you, are they a sustainable business? Most of you will say no. Why? Because they are no longer in operation. So it's not just about longevity, but it's about all other issues that integrate to make a business a going concern. So ESG is that framework that brings together the environmental issues that you're supposed to know, and we will see what those issues are, the social issues, and then the governance risk and opportunities. Helps you to tie it into your sustainability framework, and then you build long-term financial sustainability and value creation. Remember the definition of sustainability. You must create value because the system itself depends on that value that enhances it. So it's about value creation. In other words, it helps companies to achieve long-term sustainability, drive economic vibrancy, deliver long-term value. Value. For me, sustainability is always about value. And that's what I say to my clients. It must be about value. Your sustainability strategy and policy shouldn't be an abstract. It shouldn't be something that you pluck from the air. It should be about the value. It should be at the heart of what you want to create and who you are, your DNA as a business. Then it helps to evaluate the management of sustainability risk and opportunities within your operations, your supply chain, and your products. Now, a lot of people don't even look at their supply chain. The supply chain seems like an abstract, something that is outside of the business. But we found out that most of the ESG risks do not even come from the company themselves because their enterprise risk management is solid enough to cushion most of these things. It comes from their third-party vendors or their supply chain. And so how many organizations have been able to put together a supplier sustainability code? Do you have it in your organization that clearly highlights what your sustainability strategy is, what your ESG framework talks about, and how your suppliers fit into that, and get them to sign and to understand that? Have you trained your supply chain to understand what you're doing? So these are some of the issues that are encapsulated in environmental and social governance issues. So again, just trying to make you get the audience to understand ESG. 3 central factors that measure sustainability and ethical impact of a company. It is non-financial because it's away from your financial reports, but it has a material impact on the long-term risk and return on investment. So your shareholders, they want to understand how is this impacting, what are the returns on investments, and how is it impacting our returns on investment? How is it impacting our profitability? And you will notice, with issues like the pandemic, that it is very critical that you understand these issues because these are issues that can come and will affect your bottom line and your profitability. So ESG is incorporated into risk mitigation. So how do we ensure that we even avoid some risk, or how do we even manage them? How do we, ensure that, if the risk cannot be avoided, how do we manage it? It's incorporated into compliance issues and it's incorporated into investment strategies. Now, it is said that companies that use ESG standards are more consensual, they are less risky to invest in, and they're more likely to succeed in the long run. So it's important that this is understood at the end of the day, and that's from the financial side. Anyway. So why the noise? Why so much issues around ESG? Why is DCSL, now talking about it? ESG is going mainstream because it's business critical. The pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic showed us that, look, every single business, I don't know which enterprise risk management had prepared for COVID-19 and the impact of COVID-19 on the globe. whereby businesses slide, everything shut down for complete 4 months, no movement. I'm not sure that any risk management framework prepared for that. And these are some of the issues why it is important to begin to think about this thing long term. Companies that recognize the importance of ESG factors and manage them. So you can recognize them and not even manage them and not even integrate them into your business processes are increasingly attractive to investors, while companies that fail to pay attention to ESG are perceived as high risk. There's an increased emphasis on the management of ESG-related policies and practices from stakeholders such as investors, employees, and customers. Investors wanting companies to be transparent about their ESG policies and to be held accountable. This is the reason why people are talking about it now. And then COVID-19 increased awareness on a company's response to ESG risk, increased it because, again, as I said, a lot of enterprise management, enterprise risk framework did not have, none of us knew about COVID-19. It was 1918 that the last pandemic came. So nobody prepared for that. But now the pandemic is changing the view of ERM within organizations. Trust me, it has changed the dynamics around how risk management frameworks are being administered and how they're changing. Now, there's things we call the ESG criteria. And this ESG criteria is what ESG is, environmental, social, and governance factors or criteria that investors and other shareholders and stakeholders look at. So what does the environment mean? Or what does the environmental criteria mean? It talks about a company's impact on the environment, its ability to mitigate various risks that could harm the environment. So you want to ask yourself, what kind of business are we in? Now, a lot of people will say, oh, but we are not a manufacturing firm, so we don't spew emissions, we don't do anything that affects the environment. I am going to show you how environmentally you affect your environment. And again, we look at a company's carbon footprint. Many organizations in Nigeria would definitely have to talk about environmental criteria because we all use water, we all use energy, we all use generators, and our generators spew emissions into the air. So being able to understand what this means, again, in terms of energy efficiency, what are the better ways to be able to manage your carbon footprint? How do you dispose your waste? Do you even know how your waste is disposed? Particularly for organizations such as the telco that have electronic waste. Do you know how your waste is disposed? Conservation of water and things like that. Then the social factor looks at your relationship with other businesses, your standing within the local community. How are you seen? What's your social license to operate? Your commitment to diversity and inclusion. What does your workplace look like? What does your board look like? Chinedu mentioned something about 30% inclusivity. How many businesses really have a clear gender diversity on their boards? You still have a lot of boards that are just, one gender, if you will. So not just looking at your board among your workforce as well. Your corporate giving, what are you giving to? Do you have an exclusion list of what you will not support in terms of sponsorships? Or you just support every and anything? What are your political affiliations? Are you affiliated to any political organizations clearly or under the carpet? Whichever one. These are deep issues. And then of course the health and safety of the communities within you, around you, and your employees. Then the governance will assess your internal processes around corporate governance, transparent accounting methods, transparent reporting issues, executive compensation, board composition, and the relationship between the employees and your stakeholders. And of course, if we look at ethical concerns, conflict of interest issues, very, very critical, and then of course, unethical behavior. And we can talk about that even within the public sector, around some of the news that is going around right now. These are clear issues around ethics. We sometimes think that there are no ethical concerns in the public sector. They are higher in the public sector. But then for private sectors, it is more important because, again, your shareholders and your investors are looking at these clear issues. So what are some of the factors that you need to understand under each of these criteria? Under environmental, again, as I said, energy consumption, pollution, climate change issues. Some of us never think about climate change until we have a flooding issue. And maybe our businesses are flooded or the road to our businesses are flooded. Then waste production and waste management, raw material sourcing. Where do you source your raw material? Who their suppliers that give you cleaners? Are these cleaners underage? These are things that we don't really pay attention to. Carbon emissions, I've talked about that. Diversity and inclusion, human rights issues, community engagement, that is under the social criteria, stakeholder relations, employee relations. Then under your governance, we look at political affiliations, board independence, how independent is the board, conflict of interest issue, executive compensation. My class, the MBA class I take on international CSR management, one of the conversations we are having, one of the modules we're discussing is about the role of executive compensation in CSR issues. How does that affect the company? What is it based on? So again, these conversations around financial performance in linkage. So these are clear issues that investors are looking at. Transparency and disclosure. What are you disclosing? What are you not disclosing? How transparent are your books? How transparent are your internal processes? And then of course your shareholder rights as well. So these are the clear ESG issues. Now we want to look at principles and legal and regulatory frameworks around ESG issues. So there's something called the UN Principles of Responsible Investment. And this is a core area for any investor. Most investors will look at this clearly to understand, for you to understand if you are a signatory to the UNPRI. I think in Nigeria, we just have about 3 organizations, and I think they're in the financial sector, that are signatories to the UNPRI. Now, what does this principle say? It's 6 UN-backed principles for responsible investment that provide a voluntary ESG framework for analyzing ESG issues during the investment process. So if an investor is bringing money into your business, as we have seen a lot of money coming into Nigerian business sector, these are some of the issues that they want to look at. Have you incorporated ESG issues into your investment analysis? Do you incorporate it in your decision-making process? Are you active owner? Are you active owner of the process, of the ESG process? Is it incorporated in the ownership policies and practices? Do you seek appropriate disclosure on ESG issues by the entities that are invested in? These are some of the issues that investors will be asking. The principles want to ensure that there's a promotion of acceptance and implementation of the principles within the investment industry. And then, of course, to report. You must be able to report on the activities and progress towards implementing these principles. You can always read up about this. Again, as I said, I think just 3 or 4 organizations in Nigeria are signatories to the UNPRI. The next thing here I want to look at, again, under still legal and regulatory framework, is the stock exchange. So if your business is listed on the stock exchange, I'm sure that you've seen this. The stock exchange, which is a part of the United Nations Sustainable Stock Exchanges initiative, publishes sustainability disclosure guidelines for the Nigerian market. And now these guidelines is a commitment that any stock exchange that signs up to the UN Sustainable Stock Exchanges has to be part of it. It's part of the campaign of the SSC. They want to be able to close that gap, that disclosure guidance gap. That a lot of companies that are listed on the stock exchange. So by the time you are listed on the stock exchange, you can't run away from it. Your sustainability strategy has to be on point to be able to carry your ESG framework. And then it includes 4 main sessions that cover the value proposition of sustainability, integrating sustainability, the principles thereof, and the core elements of your sustainability report and what is required when you are reporting. What I've done is to try and pick out some of those things so you can see how encompassing it is. So what are these areas that the risk and opportunities around ESG impact for the Nigerian Stock Exchange? Access to capital. So how are you raising funds? Resource efficiency, cost savings and productivity, risk management, revenue growth and market access, brand value and reputation. The license to operate goes back to your CSR. Human capital, that is your internal processes, your company value as an acquisition target, and even for your listing, ability to acquire other high quality companies. Are you standing enough to be able to, are you even standing before you can talk about acquiring others? Then there are other areas. So the 9 principles and core elements under the environmental, social, and governance factors. So these are the indicators. Under governance, businesses should conduct and govern themselves with ethics, transparency, and accountability. Businesses, when engaged in influencing public and regulatory policy, should do so in a responsible manner. Businesses should provide products and services that are safe and contribute to sustainability throughout their life cycle. Now, the legal implication of all of this is that once you sign up to this, you can be sued if you don't fall into any of these things. As a business, you must understand that very clearly. It's not something that you just do, oh, it's nice to do, let's fulfill all righteousness. You can be sued if you are operating in an environment that the people understand. So I remember doing my law studies, and I always like to share this experience when I teach around ESG, where there was a class conversation around, someone went to buy a cough syrup and found out that, in the cough syrup, there was a cockroach inside the cough syrup. The question was, who should be sued? The pharmacy, the manufacturer, or who? So now there's an extension along the supply chain line. So remember, I talked about understanding your supply chain and ensuring that your supply chain understands where you stand as a business in terms of your sustainability issues and your ESG guidelines. So once you sign up to these things, if you are operating in an environment that the people understand, you can be sued that, for example, it says here your business must provide products and services that are safe and contribute to sustainability throughout its life cycle. Now, if your service or your product, again, as I said, has cockroach in it, you can be sued. So it's deeper. And that's why it's so important that the board and the management, the C-suite level executives, understand the implications and not just understand the implications, but understand how it fits into your business. Again, it says, you should be able to provide value. Remember, we talked about value as the basis of what sustainability is to your customers and in a responsible manner. Then under social, the NSC says you must promote the well-being of your employees. Think about it in the light of COVID-19 and a lot of things that changed as well. Businesses should respect the interests of and be responsive towards all stakeholders, including those who are disadvantaged, vulnerable, and marginalized. You should respect and promote human rights, and you must support inclusive growth and equitable development. Under environment, it says business should respect, protect, and make efforts to restore the environment. So again, what kind of emissions are you spewing? Is your business in any way affecting the directly or indirectly affecting the environment? How is your waste disposed? How is your vendor or your third-party supplier dealing with your waste? These are core issues that you want to be able to look into. Now, post-COVID-19, what is the trend? Is this something? It is more. It is going to be more. Now, this was even taken at the beginning of COVID-19. This is a JP Morgan survey tracking the ESG implications of the COVID-19 crisis. And here, the question was, what, in your view, would be the implications of COVID-19 crisis for ESG investment momentum? It's going to be positive. So because, look at it here, 32%, rather positive. So everybody knows that, look, post-COVID-19, we need to begin to look at our investments, our shares that we are putting. What we need to understand what is happening around it. So the pandemic, the impact of the pandemic on ESG issues is far more than we have ever anticipated. So the commitment to ESG will be more post-COVID-19. So this is something that organizations need to begin to look at. I've told a lot of my clients that they also need to begin to review their sustainability strategy and begin to ensure that the part of the risk management part is clearly defined. ESG investing will be big in the post-COVID-19 era. There's a growing adoption of ESG, and this can be found, for example, the IFC has become the first issuer to formally integrate ESG consideration into its underwriter selection process. So that shows you that, look, it's not going to go away. It's something that you must understand and be able to adopt as well. What are the key factors that you should be looking at? And this is just giving free consultancy. within your organization. What are the key factors you should look at for a successful post-pandemic ESG strategy? Make it a core driver of growth for your organization. And again, remember what I said: if you don't have a sustainability strategy, then you're not building on anything. You need your sustainability strategy. You need your risk management framework to be able to pull out a fantastic ESG strategy. Build a multidimensional one. Again, as I said, let it be multidimensional in terms of your CSR, your sustainability, your risk management framework. Move away from a focus on values. Our core values are to creating value. What is the value that we create as an organization? Post-COVID-19, how do we want to ensure that we keep creating value? This will make it clearer that your integration reduces risk and captures business opportunities for a more sustainable economy. Focus on integration. You need to focus on integration, integrating your CSR, your sustainability, and your ESG. There's a pathway to that. And then boards and C-suite must proactively educate themselves. So if you haven't trained your board on sustainability, please do so. It's very important. Get someone who understands the issues and can align it to your particular business, not an abstract. It must be aligned to your particular business so that your board can understand the return on investment as is critical to your business and commit resources to it. It's not something that you just throw to your marketing communications department or your corporate communications department. It has to be a board level decision-making issue. You must show, because the truth about ESG is that there has to be a level of commitment from the board and the executive management to be able to drive this. And at the end of the day, of course, you know that being innovative. So typically, this is what I use for clients post-COVID ESG framework. How do you integrate? This is just to give you an idea. So what did you have before, prior to COVID-19 and during COVID-19 in terms of the environmental? And this covers both your internal and external. So whether it's your employees, whether it's your supply chain, we will look through it. 3 to 6 months after COVID-19, what are you looking at doing? 2021 and beyond, what should you be looking at doing in this regard? So is there a value for this? Why should, all this English, why is it necessary? Is it important? What's the value creation opportunities? I have listed it here, and we could go into that maybe some other time. But this is the value. It aligns with your shareholder expectations and values. It gives accurate valuation of your business. It helps you to clearly evaluate. So you're not just valuing financial, you're also valuing non-financial views of the business. It strengthens your business strategy and governance. It helps you to stay ahead of ESG trends and legislation, especially for businesses that have outside Nigeria investments. It helps with energy savings and it helps you to save costs because you're also able to also mitigate most of the risk. It helps you to manage your risk. It increases worker productivity or employee productivity. It maintains and heightens your reputation. You have covered all your aces, if you will. It fosters innovation and it helps you to earn long-term loyalty. And then linking it to your financial performance, this is it. So the society begins to hold you in again, reputation, as we said. Then your environment, you're taking note of it. Your productivity at the same time, investment is coming in because you know what you're doing. You can show that you know what you're doing with all the investments that is coming in. Your costs, you're also keeping your costs down as much as possible or managing your costs. You are keeping in line with regulation, whichever regulations that you are under. Then you have a clear ESG strategy that you can deploy and that can be understood. And then, of course, the revenue opportunities, money coming in left, right, and center. So your corporate performance is top notch, if you will. So what is the role that board members can do? The full board, if you will, in terms of giving ESG oversight in this regard. Look at it from the strategy. Are ESG risk and opportunities integrated into the company's long-term strategy? How is the company measuring and monitoring the progress against milestones? Do you even have milestones and goals that are set as part of the strategy? So first of all, you must have a strategy before you now begin to look at the strategy. What have we integrated into the strategy? How are we measuring the strategy, and how are we monitoring the progress of the strategy? What is the messaging that is going out from your company? Is it aligning with your company's purpose and stakeholder interests? Risk assessments. Have material ESG risks been identified? If it has been identified, has it been incorporated into the enterprise risk management framework? Has the board allocated the oversight of this risk to the full board, or is it individual committees that are handling it? In terms of reporting, these are the things the board should be looking at. What is the best communication platform to use for the company's ESG disclosure? Is it the reporting to NSE, to the Nigerian Stock Exchange alone? Is it in our sustainability report? Is it on our website? Is it easily accessible? These are the key issues. Then I look at the board committees. So it's not just the full board now. What are the board committees looking at? So for the audit committee, in terms of disclosures, what should they be looking at? Are the ESG disclosures investor grade, or they are just disclosures for disclosure's sake? Which framework are we using? UNPRI, Equator Principles? Which one are we using? Processes and controls. Are there processes and controls in place to ensure ESG disclosures are accurate, comparable, and consistent? Assurance. Who is assuring this? Are we using an independent assurance to ensure that our disclosures are reliable? Then the governance committee. How are we communicating this to all our stakeholders? To our shareholders, to our investors? How are we communicating our ESG story? Do we even have a story? Board composition. Does the board have the necessary expertise and skills to oversee ESG risk and opportunities? I typically will advise for an independent sustainability advisor to sit on the board. It also helps as well. It's not mandatory, but it helps. Education. Have you trained your board? Do they understand why ESG is important? Is the board appropriately educated on this issue? So these are some of the things that the board, not just the full board, but the board committees can begin to look at. So why is it important to investors? These are the reasons why it's important to investors. Investors are interested in protecting the environment, issues of climate change. We are seeing it every day, rains falling when it shouldn't fall, flooding issues, and things like that. Pollution, waste management. 76% are interested in doing social good, so promoting diversity, improving education, and protecting human rights. 74% are interested in responsible corporate governance, and 59% are interested in all the three issues. And we're going to see more. Let me give you an example of ESG issues that investors look at in different industries. So this is for banks and financial institutions. 15% is allocated as cost for under environmental. And what are they looking at for the banking sector and financial institutions? They're looking at the impact of your sustainable lending, environmental impact and sustainability plan assessment, the extra credit for banks. Extra credit goes to banks who are mapping their lending to align with the sustainable development goals. Did you see that? So if you think that sustainable development goals is only it's your CSR desk and your corporate communications that should be thinking about it, look at it here. Extra credit for banks mapping their lending to align with the SDGs. And then green bond issuance. We're seeing more green bond conversations in the Nigerian market and Nigerian Stock Exchange market now. Then under social, 25% is given. And what does it look at? Financial inclusion and integration of ESG factors in underwriting, customer privacy and data security, systemic importance, and the regulatory environment. How are you managing your regulatory environment? Now, the biggest one, again, going back to what I said about your governance, your board, do they understand the issues? Are they even aware? Are they educated on these issues? 60% is aligned to it, 60%. Your culture and business conduct, the credibility of your disclosures, your risk management, your ERM, so important. What's your risk appetite? The board effectiveness, and then of course your human capital. For the telcos, what are they looking at? This is what they are looking at. Data safety and privacy. How are you handling your user data carefully? Has there been theft or leakage of confidential information? Can privacy be violated in this regard? What are the procedures and directives you have to prevent possible financial and reputational damage? How are you, disposing your electronic waste? CO2 emissions. It says the ICT sector is responsible for around 2% of global CO2 emissions. How are you managing your electronic waste? Supply chain management. Again, as I mentioned before, most environmental and social governance risks do not lie with the company themselves, but with their supply chain. So your supply chain, you have to be very clear about what's happening in your supply chain. Don't leave it to the department that deals with vendors alone. What are they doing? Have they signed, again, as I said, do you have a supplier sustainability code? Have they signed it? Do they understand it? Have you trained your supply chain in terms of understanding how this affects you as a business? Very important. The next one is for an insurance firm. I've just given this example of different sectors so that you see that it's not just something, it affects every single sector. It affects every single sector. So the ESG issues for insurance firms, this is what it will look at, practically everything that you insure. So, but what are the emerging risks and reputational risks that you need to know as a risk carrier, as a risk manager, and then as an investor? What are these issues? So these are some of the issues that are clearly always highlighted. Now, what I've done is to link all of this conversation to your risk framework. Again, it is so important. It is looking at oversight, culture, compliance, and risk. And it's just totally integrated, because being able to integrate it, being able to have oversight is critical. That's why I started with corporate governance. So whether you're a company secretary, whether you are at the level of the board, these conversations have to happen. Particularly if you're a company secretary, it must happen at that level to say, we need to train our board, we need to train our executive management to understand the linkage between our sustainability strategy and our ESG framework, as well as our corporate risk framework. Our ERM has to be understood clearly as encompassing of all of this. So whether it's your structure, whether it's your board governance, whether it's the tone at the top and at the middle and at the bottom, whether it's your corporate ethics, internal and external communication and reporting, whether it's the risk culture, whether it's the compliance with corporate policy and regulatory policies, whatever it is so important that this is all clearly defined. Now, I gave this as an example of how you can chart your risk. This is for financial institutions. So what are the risks for FIs? There are direct risks, which is lender liability for social or environmental damage caused by a client. I always give an example of how we had this conversation with the executive management of a bank, and there and then, trying to highlight how it's important that your clients don't just bring environmental impact assessment to you and you say, oh, fantastic environmental impact assessment. Environmental impact assessment is 10 a dozen. Have you been to the sites? Have you taken cognizance of what the core issues are? Are there legal issues? Are there insurance issues? Are there unfair labor practices? So the example that was given, this bank CEO decided, okay, we have this big issue, investment coming up that we're extending credit. So I'm going to go and check. Fantastic. So you come back and tell us what the issues, only to find out that the road to the company or to the factory that they were going to extend credit to has been eroded by gully erosion. So the communities around there had no road, no vehicle could get in. This particular factory gets helicopters to land inside their compound. And so what would really have happened is that the communities were just waiting for you to come and start work. And then, of course, they will picket. And what happens? They will shut down the operations, bank credit will be on hold, and then, of course, reputational issues. So these are the way to map it at the end of the day, because these are ESG issues. Again, like I said, they are links to your supply chain, your sustainability framework, how you advance, if you're a bank, even you, if you're not a bank, any other organization, what is the health and safety risk to you? What is the financial and reputational risk to you? And other issues like that. What's the negative publicity, if you will? Because reputational risk is everything. Your reputation is everything. you want to be able to look at that. So in concluding, where do we start? If we want to start, for somebody that will say, okay, I've heard everything you've said. How do we start? The first thing, draft your draft governance for effective risk management. It has to be clear. You need to be working with your risk people, your sustainability people to understand what does this mean for us. The second thing is to understand strategy and context of the business. What do we do as a business? What do we want to achieve as a business? What's our focus as a business? And then you now identify your ESG risk. You evaluate and prioritize your ESG risk. You take measures against ESG risk. You check and revise ESG risk. You disclose and report ESG risk. It's simple, but it's work to be able to be the best organization that you want to be. So that's where to start. So finally, I have said here, regardless of whether your ESG issues are prioritized as material or strategically significant, it should be appropriately addressed within your risk management processes. You must ensure that it's embedded in your wider business processes. Try and identify issues and trends on the horizon. Technological disruptions, we've seen that. COVID-19 made all of us to run into technology. But what if something happens and we can't get into the internet and the internet shuts down? Have we ever thought of it? Because nobody thought about COVID-19. So we need to begin, our risk management processes need to begin to think of almost over the top issues that can happen and how do we build mitigations around that. You know, scarcity of water, anything can happen that could create significant changes to our business. So being able to prioritize resources for ESG must be at the top burner of what the organization is doing. And at the same time, be able again to create value to the society. So thank you very much. I will take questions from here. Yeah, thank you.
Wow. Can you hear me, ma'am?
I can. Yes, I can. I can hear you.
Wow. That's indeed an insightful and forward-looking, well-delivered presentation.
Thank you.
You know, on not just CSR, on sustainability as a whole. So for me, I've distilled some key questions from this presentation, and I'll ask our audience. You know, some of these questions include: are you a sustainable business?
Can you take that again?
What long-term values are you creating that will keep sustaining your business in the future? Have you emplaced a sustainability policy or code? Have you trained your board on sustainability, considering that there should be a level of commitment from the board that is thrown at the top? What's your culture when it comes to business management? What quantum of resources have you committed to sustainability activities? These are some of the questions that we should all take home from this session. We'll take a few questions from the audience. I'm sure Mrs. Abibola will be available to provide insights and respond to those questions. For me, I've been properly schooled today, and I've realized that apart from the discovery of hidden warehouses, you know, in Nigeria, that we are stuck with food materials, COVID-19 also increased the awareness on ESG, you know, and focus attention on adoption of the principles by companies and organizations. So that's the key takeaway for me today. So I'll take a few questions. We'll have some questions already coming in. The first question says, on a scale of 10, 1 to 10, what quantum of resources or attention would you as a diligent manager allocate to issues of profitability and ESG? What quantum will you attach to profitability, and what quantum will you attach to ESG matters? We'll take that first, ma'am.
Okay. I think that this is a board decision when you look at your business. Now, the problem that I have immediately with that question is that you are putting even profitability first before ESG. You need to put ESG drives your profitability. So for example, let's take for example that our risk management framework was so highfalutin that we were able to capture the possibility of a global disruption of services for 4 months. Can you imagine what you would have done in preparation for that in terms of how to pay salaries? A lot of companies had to cut salaries to 50%. A lot of companies had to cut staff. How does that value into your profitability? So do you see what I mean? So don't place profitability over and above sustainability and ESG issues. That's always the problem. Place ESG and sustainability issues over and above everything else, and it will affect your bottom line. Environmental and social factors affect your bottom line. So for example, like for COVID-19 happened, most businesses did not open. So if you were a retail business, for example, of course, for the 4 months, you weren't selling until, of course, everybody now, you had to even make an investment to go online to be able to sell. Logistic companies had to make investments in such a way that enabled them to even, there was even no delivery for 4 months until, some level of opening started to happen. So don't think about it. The idea is to think about what are the things we need to put in place. Let's assume, I like to think about it when we're thinking about enterprise risk management, for example. COVID-19 has allowed us as risk managers to think about the worst thing. What if there's a nuclear, God forbid, as we like to say, North Korea decides that, okay, COVID-19 happened. This time around, we're going to deploy a nuclear weapon that is going to affect the entire world. What happens? And travel has to shut down again. The internet shuts down or something. What would you do? How would your business run? So that's where risk management is, and that's where you need to deploy resources too, because these are things that will affect your profitability in the long run. So that's what I can answer to that particular question.
Thank you very much, ma'am. So sustainability drives profitability in the long run. We'll have another question here. It says, should the adoption of ESG be a subject for legislation?
I don't know what you mean by legislation. We have not even been able to legislate other issues, but I think that, for businesses, you already have the regulatory framework that comes with, if you are listed on the stock exchange, for example, you don't even have a choice. You have to be able to report on your ESG. If you're not listed on the stock exchange, it does you good. We found out that, for example, for some banks that have international affiliations, there's been a demand for their vendors. For instance, if you're a vendor, I know a particular bank, if you're a vendor in a particular bank, one of the things they will ask you is for your sustainability strategy and your supply chain management policy. They want to see it so that if they give you a job and you have to give it to somebody in your supply chain, they are not going to be held responsible as the elephant in the room, if you know what I mean. Because when the third party vendor is going to picket, they're not going to picket you, the contractor. So for example, if you take organizations that take cleaners, or if you take a bank, for instance, or a multinational like Chevron, if the cleaners are going to go on strike, they're not going to go on strike picketing the contractor that is paying them below average wage. They are going to go to that organization, if you know what I mean, and picket. We're going to, so the reputation of the parent organization, if you will, is what will be at stake, not the contractor. So which is why it's important that your supply chain understands, that line, that extension is clearly understood, what is not acceptable, what is acceptable, and things like that. So the demand is on you as an organization to do what is right. Again, don't wait until regulatory frameworks begin to demand for this. By that time, you begin to scramble because you don't have a sustainability framework, you don't have a strategy, you are not already taking into consideration ESG factors within your business. And as a small business, you can begin to think about these things. You don't have to be a big business. Small businesses can begin to think about it. What's your policy in terms of your suppliers? What's your policy in terms of your sustainability policy? What's your policy? What's your policy around your employee management, for example? So these are some of the issues.
Thank you very much, ma'am. We'll have another question.
I think there's a question. I saw a question here that says, how do you ensure body independence in a family business?
Yes.
irrespective of the business, even if it's a family business, the thing about family businesses, the sustainability and longevity of family businesses is when structures are in place. Now, if you are not willing to put in structures because you don't want to offend the sensibilities of family members, permit me to say with all authority, you are not running a business, you are running a family. A family business that will run properly must have structures in place. And structures mean that there are policies that everybody has to align with. So the independence of the board has to be that your corporate governance policy is clear to term. So if you don't even have a corporate governance policy that is to term, then there's a problem. So whether you're a family business, if you're a family business, independence can only be achieved when your corporate governance policy is on par. Who does what? Who does not do what? What is allowed? What is not allowed? What is acceptable? What is not acceptable? All those things the framework needs to be clearly in place before that. And those are the things that will highlight those independents. You can be talking to DCSL to help you with that, because they will now be able to help you align how those things are supposed to work within, even as a family business, as it were.
Thank you very much, man. That was quite insightful. I think there's a last question here. Sorry, please. Okay, so there's a last question here from, okay. It says, how does ESG impact investment decisions?
We've talked clearly about that. I mean, if I have to share my slides again, we've talked very clearly about that. These are the three critical factors are what investors will look at. And I've listed them all again. How are you relating? So let me see if I can share that particular place again, just to give you an idea. I'm sorry. I'm trying to.
Bob, I can't do that.
Okay, let me finish. Just a minute. I just want to show what it is that investors will look at. These are the areas that investors will look at. Investors are going to look at, in terms of your environmental, how do you manage your energy consumption? Are you even able to account for your energy consumption? In countries like the UAE, for instance, they make it possible for you to be able to calculate your energy consumptions. They make it possible for you to be able to calculate your carbon emission. So if you're running a generator, there's something that is stuck to it that calculates how much emission goes out into the air. They will look at, your raw material sourcing, which is where your supply chain comes in. Where are you sourcing your raw materials from?
I don't know how to do this.
I will help you when I'm done. Then under social, they're going to look at your community engagement. How are you perceived within your community? The health and safety of your organization and your employees. How is this managed? So these are the things that will be looked at. Another thing that you need to understand, I think I had showed that. Sorry about that. Is to look at how this is integrated here. So if you look at this, under governance, these are the things that is it. So these are the things investors are looking at. These are what they are looking at. How independent is your board? What are you disclosing? Do you have a risk management framework, a risk management system? What is it? How effective is your board? Your human capital, how is it being managed? Under social, how are you integrating ESG factors into your entire business processes? These are just examples of what investors look at. So that is how it affects investment.
All right, thank you very much, ma'am. Those are the only questions for now. I'm sure we have all gained a lot from this presentation, and I will take the feedback to our companies, our boards, and our respective organizations. Thank you very much, Mr. Abimbola. People would like to know if they can get the slides for this presentation.
Yeah.
Is it going to be available?
Okay, we'll see to that.
Okay.
It's a free session, it's not a paid session.
We really appreciate that. So, in the absence of any other question, thank you very much, Ma, for making our time to attend this webinar.
Chew it very well, oh, chew it. Let me see, open your mouth.
This insightful paper to us today. We have a lot of feedback, a lot of takeaways from this session, and we hope that we'll bring the same to bear in our respective companies. Just to wrap up the proceedings for the day, I will enjoy the participants to kindly ensure that they complete the feedback forms to us to enable us perform better with respect to our upcoming trainings and all that. So please, a feedback form will be deployed on your respective screens, so you can just click on it and complete. It wouldn't take you more than 30 seconds and you are done. And then for those who do not know about DCSL, just to let you know that DCSL is a corporate services company based in Lagos, with an office in Abuja, and we basically provide trainings for directors, senior management, corporate secretarial services, board inductions. We facilitate retreats and strategy sessions. We also provide board evaluation and peer review services. We assist companies to codify their board and committee charters. We also provide business advisory and regulatory compliance services. We have some upcoming trainings scheduled for the month of April. We have the training on improving the performance of the Board Audit Committee, which is scheduled for Monday, the 29th of April, 2001. It's going to also be virtually delivered. We enjoy the participants to endeavor to reach out to the board, committee members to ensure that they make out time to attend this training. We also have a training on the governance of risk, which will be coming up on Tuesday, 30th April 2001, the day after the audit committee meeting. We also invite the audience to extend this invitation to their directors, colleagues, and contacts, so that they can attend. So basically, that's it for the day. We want to thank Ms. Abimbola once more for her time and for the presentation. We are sincerely grateful. We have been properly schooled, and we ensure that the benefits of this session will impact greatly on our different businesses and ultimately on our bottom lines. We'll plead with Mr. Abimbola to make the presentation slides available so that we can share with our participants, and I hope she will oblige us. We look forward to welcoming you to our future events and also to partnering with you and your organizations. So thank you very much for making out your time, and do have a pleasant evening.